A chilling wind whistled through the dark, empty streets of a small, forgotten town. The once lively streets now lay in the shadows, shrouded in an eerie silence that was only broken by the occasional howl of the wind. This was the kind of place where secrets were kept hidden in the dark, where the sun seemed to hesitate before rising and the moon was always in a hurry to set. In this town, the houses were hunched together as if trying to keep warm, their weathered facades bearing the scars of time. The inhabitants, few and far between, were just as mysterious. They were the kind of people who kept their heads down and their doors locked, especially when nightfall came. Their faces were etched with a kind of wary caution, a silent testament to the unspoken horrors that lurked in the darkness. And among them our protagonist had just arrived, a newcomer, drawn to the forgotten town by a sense of curiosity that was soon replaced by an unsettling sense of unease. The town, with its silent streets and hidden secrets, seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something, or maybe someone. As the day waned, the shadows lengthened, creeping into every corner, casting an ever-deepening gloom. The protagonist, despite the growing unease, was compelled to stay, drawn into the web of this town's enigma. The air was heavy with an unspoken dread, a dread that clung to the very walls of the houses and the cobblestones underfoot. It was as if the town itself was in the grip of a haunting, an insidious presence that came alive when the darkness fell. Every creak of the old wooden houses, every rustle of the wind through the skeletal trees, every whisper of the night seemed to carry a warning, a foreboding message that echoed in the silence. As the night crept in, the protagonist's heartbeat echoed the ticking of the town's old clock tower, each beat a second closer to the unknown. As the clock struck midnight, an eerie silence cloaked the town, and a bone-chilling scream echoed in the distance. Startled by the scream, our protagonist ventured out into the cold, the echo still ringing in their ears. The scream was unlike anything they had ever heard before. It was a disturbing symphony of fear and despair, a sound so chilling that it seemed to permeate the very air around them. As they stepped out into the night, their heart pounded in their chest like a wild drum. It was a typical night, or so it seemed, with the moon casting long, eerie shadows that danced around them. The streetlights flickered erratically, their dull light creating a grotesque play of shadows. Each flicker seemed to mock their bravery, turning the familiar neighborhood into an alien landscape. As they moved towards the source of the scream, a sudden gust of wind blew past them. It was a cold, biting wind that seemed to carry with it an unnatural chill. The trees swayed violently, their leaves rustling like whispered warnings in an unknown language. It was as if nature itself was warning them of the danger that lay ahead. Their fear grew with every step they took. What was once a safe, familiar neighborhood now felt like a labyrinth of dread and uncertainty. They could feel eyes on them, unseen watches in the darkness. Every shadow seemed to hide a lurking threat. Every sound was a potential danger. Yet they pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and an unspoken fear of what would happen if they turned back. As they neared the source of the scream, the strange occurrences grew more intense. The wind howled louder, the shadows seemed to grow darker, and the feeling of being watched became almost unbearable. Their breath came in short, sharp gasps as fear gripped their heart. Suddenly, a chilling whisper in the wind sent shivers down their spine. "Leave while you still can." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a ghostly echo that resonated with their deepest fears. But our protagonist, despite the terror, was not one to back down. The mystery had to be solved, the scream had to be answered, and so they pressed on into the unknown. The whisper in the wind sent a cold wave of fear through our protagonist. The once familiar hum of the breeze now echoed with an eerie undertone, a cryptic message from the past, a past that was about to reveal itself in the most chilling of ways. As our protagonist delved deeper into the history of this seemingly quiet town, what was once curiosity soon turned into a bone-chilling terror. The quaint town, with its verdant fields and picturesque houses, held a dark secret, a secret that was as old as the town itself. Years ago, a tragic event had shaken the very foundations of this town. A fire had engulfed the town's oldest mansion, taking with it the lives of an entire family. The family of 7, including 5 innocent children, were consumed by the relentless flames. Their cries for help echoed through the silent night, leaving a permanent imprint on the town's history. The townsfolk say that the fire was no accident, but a result of a curse so powerful that it had doomed the town to a lifetime of sorrow and fear. This curse was said to be laid by a scorned woman who was wronged by the townspeople, and in her wrath, she had doomed them all. The more our protagonist learned about this horrifying past, the more the whispering wind seemed to carry a sinister message. It was as though the wind was speaking to our protagonist, whispering the chilling tales of the past. As the truth unfolded, the atmosphere grew denser and the fear more tangible. Every rustle of the leaves, every creak of the wooden houses, every howl of the wind seemed to echo with the cries of the doomed family. The town's horrifying past was not just a tale. It was a living, breathing entity that was now a part of our protagonist's reality. The protagonist's heart pounded in their chest like a war drum. Their breath hitched, their palms sweated. The realization was clear and terrifying. They were in the heart of the cursed town. As the truth unfolded, the whispering wind grew louder. "You're next. You're next." The chilling words echoed through the protagonist's mind over and over. A cold shiver ran down their spine, the kind of fear that freezes the blood in your veins. It was time for the encounter they'd been dreading. The confrontation with the spectral menace that had cast a dark shadow over their once peaceful town. The air became heavy, as if an unseen force was pressing down on them, sucking the very life out of the room. The temperature dropped sharply, a frosty chill that gnawed at the bone. The room grew eerily silent, the kind of quiet that screams danger. Then it appeared. The apparition was a terrifying sight to behold, a grotesque figure that defied all logic and understanding. It was a twisted mockery of the human form, a grotesque caricature that had been pulled from the darkest corners of a nightmare. The entity was an abomination, its presence a blight that tainted everything it touched. Its eyes, if you could call them that, were bottomless pits of despair, voids that could consume the soul. The protagonist felt a cold dread wash over them. This was not just a ghost. It was a harbinger of doom, a spectral judge and executioner. They could feel its malevolent gaze bore into them, a terrible scrutiny that seemed to peer into the very depths of their soul. The encounter was a dance with death, a chilling waltz on the precipice of the abyss. The tension was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket of fear that threatened to consume them. The protagonist could feel their heart hammering in their chest, a deafening drumbeat in the silence. But they stood their ground, their resolve hardened by the knowledge of what was at stake. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the apparition vanished, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of dread. The room was once again plunged into darkness, the only evidence of the encounter a lingering chill and a whispered warning. "Tomorrow, when the clock strikes midnight, your time will come." With the ominous warning ringing in their ears, the protagonist prepared for the worst. As the final sands of time slipped through the hourglass, a sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air. A chilling wind blew through the abandoned house, echoing the eerie silence that had descended. Setting their fear aside, the protagonist knew they had to face the apparition. The specter that had haunted their dreams, their waking hours, their very existence, was now a confrontation they could no longer avoid. The protagonist had become a prisoner in their own life, and the only way to break free was to break the curse. A sense of resolve tightened their grip on the family heirloom, the only weapon they had against the entity. The heirloom, a small trinket that had been passed down through generations, was said to possess a power that could banish evil. It was their last hope, their only hope. They could feel the energy pulsating from it, the ancient magic humming a silent song of courage. As they moved through the darkened house, every creak, every whisper of wind, every shadow cast added to the growing tension. The minutes seemed to stretch into hours, and the silence was deafening. The protagonist could feel their heart pounding in their chest, a steady drumbeat echoing the countdown to the inevitable. They knew they were getting closer. The temperature dropped, their breath fogged in the air, and an icy chill ran down their spine. The haunting laughter of the apparition bounced off the walls, a taunting reminder of the terror that awaited them. Yet, they pressed on. Fear was no longer an option. They had to confront this. They had to end this. The protagonists drew a deep breath, steeling themselves for the final confrontation. They raised the heirloom high above their head, the ancient power glowing in the darkness. As the clock began to strike midnight, the protagonists braced themselves for the final confrontation. The house seemed to hold its breath. The world outside fell silent, and all that was left was the ticking of the clock, counting down to the climax of their chilling tale.